Hello, my name is Kyanna Orr, and I am excited to present with my fellow research assistant and fiance, Zachary Ta. We will be presenting on sleep, diet, and physical activity in the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is a qualitative analytical study. We are through the Division of Public Health and through the Department of Family and Preventative Medicine. Here's a quick overview of what we intend to cover in this presentation. I will be going over the background of our study, some study questions, as well as our hypothesis, our study design, our demographics, and our measures. Zach will be going over our study results, some study questions that we both had, acknowledgements, and our sources. In this slide, I'm going to be discussing our study background, and I'm going to be showing an example of a previous study, a very recent study, that had very similar aims to our current study. The title of the study was Changes in Diet, Sleep, and Physical Activity, and its association with differences in negative mood during the COVID-19 lockdown. Authors were Joan Ingram et al. The journal was Frontiers in Psychology. And in the study, participants rated their mood on each of a total of 10 adjectives. These adjectives included confusion, tension, depression, and fatigue. These were rated at specific time points using a 100-point slider scale, with higher scores indicating greater negative mood. And this was rated through an NMS, which stands for Negative Mood Score. I would like to highlight in this graph representation that in the top left, we see NMS in relation to alcohol consumption during the lockdown. We see that there are not any significant changes there. However, in the top right, we see that there are some specific and significant changes in diet due to differences in NMS scores. And in the bottom left, we also see that there are some significant changes in sleep during the lockdown, according to NMS scores. And we see the same significant difference in physical activity during the lockdown, according to NMS scores. This essentially shows that negative mood during the COVID-19 lockdown does have an impact and does have a relationship with diet, sleep, and physical activity. Our study questions included: how will pandemic-related changes affect sleep, diet, and physical activity among adults in Utah, as well as are changes in health behavior predicative of psychological distress? Our hypothesis was that on days that participants report higher stress, they had poorer health and prevention behaviors. We also hypothesized that improved health and prevention behaviors will lead to lower stress. Our research design consisted of over 200 Utah adults aged 18 and older. From each of our participants, we conducted interviews that were at 2 different time points over the course of 4 months. Each interview lasted approximately 15 minutes, and I will be discussing the discussion points and topics covered during the interviews in a couple of slides. We also collected surveys and questionnaires from each of our participants. They were collected at 3 different time points over the course of 4 months. We collected morning surveys, which assessed sleep, as well as evening surveys, which assessed stress, symptoms, and prevention behaviors that were throughout the day. And these were collected over the course of 7 consecutive days, times 3, so that was a total of 21 days. And finally, we collected 2 dietary recalls per time point, and these simply assessed the diet of our participants the preceding day. On this slide, we have included a quick snapshot of our demographics data. This is not representative of our entire study population. Rather, it is representative of the final 30 transcripts that we ended up choosing for our final results and for the coding process, which I will get into in a little bit. But as you can see here, we created quick tables on the data for gender, race, ethnicity, age, and marital status. In this slide, I've included all 6 questions that we discussed during our 15-minute interviews, but I'm mainly going to highlight the first 3 because these were the specific questions that we used for our data analysis portion in this specific qualitative study. So the first question is, what was the most noticeable change you experienced in your life during the pandemic? And what specific positive changes and negative experiences did you have? The second question involves, what changes in stress did you experience due to the pandemic? And the third is, how have your daily routines changed due to the pandemic? Underneath question 3, we specifically highlighted changes in sleep, diet, and physical activity because these were the main themes that we looked for in our transcripts as we completed our coding process, and these were the primary themes that we found links to and relationships with and ended up finding results for, which Zach will be talking about in his results section. Now I'm going to discuss the coding process. Our study was a qualitative study, and therefore it involved a process of examining and interpreting non-numerical and unstructured data. In case you are wondering what coding is the process of labeling and organizing qualitative data to identify common themes and relationships between them. Coding is important for a qualitative study as it helps assign codes to different transcripts of our interviews, making it easier to summarize the results of entire surveys by categorizing specific excerpts and specific themes. Zach and I were the primary coders, and we evaluated transcripts to develop themes, and then those themes were refined by a consensus of 3 different individuals. Our 4 primary themes we came up with were sleep, diet, physical activity, and stress, and underneath those we came up with several different sub-themes, which Zach will get into in a bit. So to quickly wrap up my portion of the presentation, I just want to emphasize that our study primarily focuses on the link between sleep and stress. DEDOOSE, which is a coding software that we used, allowed us to put together this data through categorizing our excerpts and deeply analyzing the relationships between our 4 themes and taking a deeper look at the relationship between sleep and stress. Now I'll let Zach take over and discuss the results of our study. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks Kyanna for beautifully presenting on those slides. Again, my name is Zach and I'm the other UROP recipient for the study. And so now I'm going to present on what we found in our research. So after conducting and completing the data collection, we extrapolated these major themes, and these were relevant in our qualitative results. So here we have sleep, we have diet, physical activity, and stress. And in the next several slides, I'll be going over each primary theme and some of the correlations that we found. So first, we have our qualitative sleep data. We created 7 codes under this theme, and some examples would be sleep that is linked to stress, decreased sleep, having trouble sleeping, dreams and nightmares, more sleep, more tired, and no change in sleep. We noticed that participants that mentioned stress had poorer sleep quality than participants who did not mention stress. For example, a participant who experienced a lot of stress throughout the course of the pandemic said, "Because of stress, I slept less. I would wake up in the middle of the night." End quote. We had a total of 9 excerpts that talked about sleep that is linked to stress. In addition to this, increased stress was correlated with increase in vivid dreams and nightmares. As one participant mentioned, starting quote, "I've had a lot of really weird dreams. I think there's just stress and frustration that creeps into your subconscious." There is a positive correlation between sleep and stress associated with the pandemic. Here we have our diet data, and we see that due to the pandemic, the majority of our participants participated in healthier eating habits. So 20 excerpts out of 30 total transcripts mentioned that people adopted better eating habits, and 25 excerpts mentioned that people started cooking more foods at home. We noticed that because people are scared of developing illnesses due to the pandemic, they implemented healthy eating to boost their health and immunity. Therefore, we can conclude that the prevalence of COVID-19 may suggest healthier eating habits. There were no correlations between sleep and diet that we found. So here we have the qualitative data for physical activity. We noticed that a fair amount of participants mentioned that they are less active due to the pandemic. And even one participant said, I used to go jogging, but now I've stopped when the pandemic started. There were 26 excerpts that correlated to less activity, and this may be due to the fact that there was a government shutdown early on in the pandemic, and this made people unable to go to the gym, they prevented people from walking in public as frequently, etc. So in sum, we noticed that due to the pandemic, there was an increase of less activity among the participants in our study. All right, so lastly, we have our stress data. And so we created 11 codes for this theme, 8 codes shown on this slide, and 3 codes on the next slide. So there were a few participants that mentioned that they had reduced stress, but for the majority of the codes, many participants mentioned that they had increased levels of stress throughout the pandemic. And this may be due to a variety of factors such as isolation, reduced socialization, academic or financial problems, etc. We listed those codes in this table, as you can see here. And the higher frequency codes within this slide would be increased stress, academic stress, financial stress, and reduced socializations. Now, these codes were very prevalent among the college-age participants through middle-aged adults. All right, so to wrap up the stress data, we have these 3 additional codes. We have uncertainty slash unknown, we have stress linked to COVID-19, and then we have family stress. So the most prevalent code among the stress data would be the stress that is related to COVID-19. As you can see here, we have 30 excerpts. And this makes sense because at the start of the pandemic, there were a lot of uncertainty encompassing this novel disease, and many people feared of contracting it. They don't know if they'll be severely ill, they don't know if they'll die from it. And the stress that was linked to COVID-19 is actually linked to all the other stressors in the table. So for example, here we have family stress extremely high. We have 21 excerpts due to the pandemic. Many people lost their relatives due to COVID. Many people do not want to get their grandparents sick. This means that they are unable to meet them, family gatherings and vacations are canceled. So all of these abrupt changes can definitely put an impact on the daily lifestyle. This is just a slide to highlight the summary of findings in our research study. So we found that increased stress is linked to poor sleep quality. So this would include participants mentioning that they had trouble sleeping. We had participants mention that they had increased nightmares and vivid dreams. We also found that the prevalence of COVID-19 led to healthier eating habits. So more people started experiencing more cooking at home. A lot of people adjusted their eating habits by eating more healthy. And finally, we didn't really find any correlations between sleep and diet. Okay, so even though we completed our research, we still had additional questions that are related to this area of research. Our first question would be, what are the most efficient coping mechanisms for stress during the COVID-19 pandemic? Our second question would be, what interventions will help improve stress prevention, psychological adjustment, and population health going forward? And lastly, does sleep imbalance due to COVID-19 affect additional variables, including metabolic imbalance, obesity, and diverse cognitive disorders? Okay, so I hope you find our research project informative and helpful, but if you have any other questions about COVID-19, sleep, or stress, I highly encourage you to read this amazing research article that our PI/mentor, Dr. Kelly Barron, was a part of. And this article will essentially help you learn about how to manage your sleep during a pandemic and many more. So yes, I highly encourage this. It's pretty cool. And lastly, I I want to take a moment to thank all of these amazing people for assisting in this research study. We have our research assistant, Layla Lincoln. We have our graduate student, Celine Tobin, and 9 undergraduate volunteers that helped us in the study. We had Sarah, Henry, Juliana, Alex, Doug, Max, Alana, Kira, and Talmage. We want to shout out to our clinical research coordinator, Andy Rivera, and our consultant, Sarah Salisbury. And also, I want to thank our viewers for listening in on our research study. This is pretty much our research. I hope you liked it. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Again, thank you so much.